Imagine this. You're at a dinner party, surrounded by laughter and nods, everyone seemingly on the same page. The same recycled jokes bounce around, the same bland opinions get repeated, and no one dares to stir the surface. Then, someone breaks the pattern. They say something real, something sharp, unsettling, and true. The laughter dies. A tense silence falls. Eyes shift, phones come out, chairs squeak as people reposition themselves uncomfortably. What just happened? You've just witnessed one of the oldest social reflexes in human history, the collective discomfort in the presence of genuine intelligence. This isn't a recent phenomenon born from digital echo chambers or modern politics. No, this unease runs deep, embedded in the human psyche long before the internet ever existed. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer recognized this dynamic centuries ago. He observed that society doesn't fear intelligence because it's complex. It fears it because it reveals. Intelligent people hold up mirrors, and in those mirrors we see the things we work very hard to avoid: our self-deception, our contradictions, our unexamined lives. Let's be honest. No one brags about the friend who constantly calls them out on their inconsistencies. You don't hear people say, "I love being around Mark. He always points out when I'm lying to myself." That's because most people are more interested in comfort than clarity. Schopenhauer understood this perfectly. He argued that people construct an illusory version of the world, a kind of psychological theater where everything supports the narratives they've chosen to believe. In this constructed world, doubt is unwelcome, and truth, especially when it's uncomfortable, is treated like an intruder. But intelligent individuals are natural disruptors of this theater. They don't accept the performance, they question the script. They see through the props and challenge the stage. They can't pretend the emperor is clothed when he's clearly naked, and society, for the most part, prefers the illusion. It's not that intelligent people want to be difficult, it's that their minds are wired to notice, to analyze, to penetrate beneath the surface. And that tendency, while necessary for growth, is often perceived as a threat. Now picture this. You're watching a feel-good movie with friends. Everyone is absorbed in the fantasy, the triumphs, the flawless ending, the neat moral conclusions. But you see the cracks, the cliches, the lazy plot. You notice that the movie avoids any meaningful engagement with life's complexities. Do you speak up? Do you risk ruining the mood by voicing what you see? This is the daily reality for many highly perceptive individuals. They're not trying to be killjoys. They simply can't ignore what their minds pick up. The dissonance between what is and what's portrayed becomes impossible to unsee. Schopenhauer called this phenomenon the burden of consciousness. The more you understand, the harder it becomes to live in ignorance. Awareness isolates. It's like being the only sober person at a chaotic party. Suddenly, the music sounds different. The conversations lose coherence, and the whole scene becomes absurd. You're present, but not quite part of it. That's what it's like to live with a deeper awareness in a world that runs on consensus. And this is precisely where society gets defensive. Because if the intelligent person is right, if the world truly is full of contradictions and self-deceptions, then what does that say about the rest of us? What does it mean for the systems we trust, the identities we've built, and the values we hold dear? The real threat of intelligence isn't the person who scores high on IQ tests or knows obscure facts. It's the independent thinker who challenges the fundamental assumptions everyone else silently agrees upon. Society is built on shared beliefs. This paper is money, because we all say it is. This flag represents a country because we agree it does. These routines are normal because we've collectively decided not to question them. But what happens when someone steps back and says, "Wait, why? Why do we spend decades working jobs we hate to buy things we don't need? Why do we tolerate a system where some have billions and others starve? Why do we treat conformity as morality and call individual thought arrogance?" Those questions shake the very foundations of social order, and people who've staked their identity on those foundations react with hostility. Schopenhauer saw this hostility for what it was, not a rational disagreement, but a defense mechanism. Most people don't actually want the truth. They want comfort. They don't want growth. They want affirmation. They don't want their beliefs challenged. They want their worldview mirrored back at them. The mere existence of someone who questions things, who sees beyond the veil, becomes deeply threatening. And here's the strange part. Society responds to this kind of intellectual disruption as if it were physical danger. Schopenhauer noted that people react to new, challenging ideas the same way they react to a wild animal in the room, with a fight-or-flight response. They either lash out, attacking the source of discomfort, or they withdraw, pretending it doesn't exist. Have you ever felt attacked when someone questioned a belief you hold deeply? That gut reaction, that defensive spark, isn't about logic. It's about identity. To question someone's beliefs is to question who they think they are. And for most, that's intolerable. That's why those who think deeply, who challenge openly, often find themselves on the outskirts. Not because they're unfriendly or arrogant, but because their presence makes others uneasy. The discomfort isn't really about them. It's about what they represent. The unknown, the unfiltered, the real. Rather than face that discomfort, society invents narratives to justify pushing them away. They think they're better than us. They're too negative. They overanalyze everything. But these aren't genuine critiques. They're emotional shields against intellectual insecurity. Schopenhauer knew this intimately. His most important work, The World as Will and Representation, was ignored in his time. The academic community dismissed him. The public overlooked him. And why? Because he dismantled comforting illusions. He argued that much of what we call love is rooted in biological impulse, that our decisions are driven more by hidden desires than by conscious reasoning, and that free will, in the truest sense, might be an illusion. These were not ideas society was eager to hear. And yet Schopenhauer wasn't cynical out of bitterness or malice. He wasn't motivated by a desire to mock humanity or elevate himself above others. His philosophical harshness came from a deep conviction that truth, even when it wounds, is more vital, more transformative than any comforting illusion we cling to. His goal was never to shame society, but to wake it up. To him, a painful truth was a kind of medicine. Bitter, yes, but ultimately healing. He believed that real progress, both personal and collective, begins only when we stop lying to ourselves. But that idea, the idea that truth should take precedence over comfort, is profoundly unsettling in a world built on beautiful, seductive lies. We don't just tolerate illusions, we depend on them. We build our relationships, our goals, even our self-worth on fragile narratives that are designed to protect us from the deeper, often darker, complexities of reality. Today, the fear of painful truths hasn't vanished. It has evolved and multiplied. In our digital age, the very mechanisms that could have been used to spread thoughtful reflection have instead been optimized to reward noise over nuance. Social media has taken every uncomfortable insight Schopenhauer identified and amplified it through algorithms that prioritize speed, outrage, and emotional gratification. The loudest voices, the ones that simplify, exaggerate, and entertain, rise to the top. The thinkers, the observers, the ones who ask uncomfortable questions or point out inconvenient patterns, they're pushed to the margins. Complexity doesn't trend, subtlety doesn't sell. The culture prefers emotional sugar to philosophical sustenance. What we consume mentally and emotionally resembles fast food, instantly satisfying but ultimately hollow, leaving us intellectually starved and psychologically malnourished. When those with depth try to enter this noisy space, when they ask the audience to pause, reflect, and consider multiple sides of a story, they're often met not with curiosity, but with resistance. They're dismissed as elitists, as if thinking carefully were a privilege rather than a discipline. They're accused of being too serious, too dark, too complicated, anything to avoid actually engaging with the substance of what they're saying. In a culture that equates popularity with truth and brevity with intelligence, deep thinkers are treated like intruders. And the tragedy is, many of them withdraw, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. They aren't isolating themselves because they think they're better than others. They're simply unable to have meaningful conversations in a space where meaning is constantly diluted. The more aware you become of this imbalance, the more alienated you feel. Not because you've chosen detachment, but because the surrounding culture no longer speaks your language. you find yourself disconnected not by distance, but by depth. In a world that mistakes noise for wisdom and reaction for insight, those who seek truth over comfort are not just rare, they're often invisible. Because at its core, intelligence isn't about ego or superiority. It's not about feeling above others or flaunting knowledge. True intelligence is about perception. It's about noticing what others overlook, questioning what others accept, and understanding complexities where others see only simplicity. It's not loud or flashy. It's quiet, observant, unsettling, and that's what makes it so isolating. When you begin to see the deeper layers of reality, when you recognize patterns, illusions, contradictions that others seem blind to, the way you experience the world fundamentally changes. You no longer move through life with the same assumptions, and that shift, while enlightening, creates a growing distance between you and those who still operate within those assumptions. This distance isn't born of rejection or disdain. You don't pull away because you want to. You pull away because real connection requires shared perception, and when the lens through which you see life becomes vastly different from those around you, communication begins to break down. Conversations feel shallow, small talk becomes unbearable, and even well-meaning interactions start to feel like performance rather than genuine exchange. It's not that others are unworthy of your time. It's that the depth you crave, the honesty you seek, the questions you can't help but ask, rarely find a home in the surface-level rhythms of social interaction. Schopenhauer understood this alienation intimately. He didn't just theorize about it. He lived it in full. He walked through a world that often dismissed or ridiculed his insights because they disrupted the comfort of the majority. His work, often bleak and piercing, wasn't meant to depress but to awaken, to remind us that truth, real truth, often demands solitude, that seeing the world clearly is a lonely gift. His life stands as a powerful testament to the emotional cost of consciousness. He knew that clarity often comes at the expense of belonging, that honesty can feel like exile in a society addicted to illusion. And that's the haunting paradox of awareness. The more awake you become, the fewer people you can truly share that wakefulness with. Not because you want to walk alone, but because the path you're on is narrow, steep, and often invisible to others. The path of truth has never been crowded, not because it's hidden but because it requires the courage to see and the strength to carry what you see in silence when no one else is ready to look. Imagine being fluent in a rare language, one that few around you understand. You can get by with surface-level exchanges, share pleasantries, and meet basic needs. But the meaningful conversations, the ones that truly matter, remain out of reach. Over time, it starts to feel like you're acting out a diluted version of yourself just to be accepted. Your truest self, the part that hungers for depth, remains tucked away and unseen. Not out of pride or superiority, but from the simple ache of wanting to be understood in a world that rarely listens closely. It's exhausting, constantly translating your thoughts into something more digestible, more acceptable. And when you pull back, when you grow quiet, society often misreads it. They call it aloofness. They label your solitude as antisocial, your self-awareness as arrogance. But that's not the truth. What they're really seeing is the discomfort that clarity creates. Let's look closer at why intelligent people often unsettle others. At its root, it's about exposure, the fear of being seen too clearly. Most people wear masks. They strive to appear competent, composed, and confident. We tailor our appearances, rehearse the right social scripts, and fine-tune our online personas. But someone deeply perceptive, a person who sees patterns, spots contradictions, and listens between the lines, poses a threat to those facades. Not because they intend to, but because their mind is naturally wired to seek what lies beneath the surface. They pick up on misalignments between word and deed, on subtle emotional cues, on the hidden motivations most would prefer to keep hidden. In their presence, people often feel exposed, as if their internal chaos has been quietly uncovered. And that kind of vulnerability is terrifying. So we retreat. We call them too intense, too analytical, too much. Instead of confronting our own discomfort, we project the blame outward, casting them as the ones who just don't fit. Arthur Schopenhauer once said that most people live in quiet desperation, moving through life on autopilot, never questioning whether the path they're on was ever theirs to begin with. They follow maps drawn by others, chasing goals inherited from society rather than chosen by conscience. Those who think deeply, who ask disruptive questions, threaten this system, not with arrogance but with clarity. They wonder, is this all there is? Are we chasing the wrong ideals? What if fulfillment isn't found in success or status, but in meaning? These questions are dangerous because they demand reflection, and reflection can be uncomfortable. It forces us to confront the possibility that we've been investing in a life that doesn't nourish us, that we've been pursuing things that ultimately leave us empty. When someone challenges the norms we've built our identity around, it can feel like an attack. But it's not destruction, it's awakening. Schopenhauer believed consciousness was both a curse and a gift. The curse is in the loneliness, the alienation, the awareness that often isolates rather than connects. But the gift is immense. It's in the ability to find beauty where others see none, to perceive meaning others miss, to live a life driven by insight rather than imitation. The key lies in learning how to hold both, how to honor your difference without resenting it, and how to use your intelligence not as a weapon that divides, but as a bridge that invites others into deeper understanding. That takes maturity, it takes patience, but it also takes boldness. Let's be clear, the world needs people like you. It needs questioners, challengers, the thinkers who won't settle for easy answers. Our progress as a civilization depends on those who dare to ask, what if we did things differently? Every step forward we've ever taken, from science to art to human rights, started with someone who saw what others couldn't and had the courage to speak. Your intelligence, then, is not just your gift, it's your responsibility. Use it, share it. Don't wield it with arrogance, but don't bury it out of fear either. Speak truth, even when your voice trembles, even when others look away.